Hello, true creatives, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn, and I'm thrilled to have with me today Tiffani Bova. Tiffani is a customer growth and innovation evangelist at Salesforce, known to be one of not only the most innovative but also best places to work in the world. She is the author of Growth IQ, and she's also one of Thinkers 50's top management thinkers in the world. So I've been looking forward to having this discussion with her for quite a while. Tiffani, it's wonderful speaking with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Now, for people who haven't come across your work before, could you just give us a very brief background as to where you got started and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. I was a practicing, individually quota-bearing sales rep for a number of years selling technology. And then I sort of moved up the ranks and became, team lead, a manager, and then got into the executive ranks, at which time I actually got the opportunity to take over marketing as well as customer service in a call center. And so it gave me a really good perspective of what was going on in organizations as it related specifically to those three groups and growing revenue for the business. But also I was super early in the cloud. I was a Loquist beta client. I was Constant Contacts beta client. So I had been doing cloud-based selling and commission plans and organizational structures and coverage models since early 2000. So it put me in a little bit of a unique position. And then I spent a decade at Gartner Group as a research fellow covering sales transformation, digital optimization, indirect channel strategies, advising probably the 50 largest tech companies in the world in how to grow better and smarter. Salesforce created a role for me about 6.5 years ago to come and continue doing what I was doing, do it for us, do it for our customers, and continuing to deliver thought leadership out to the market. And here I am. So that's sort of a short history.
Now, you mentioned it's Salesforce now. That's obviously known as being at the forefront of a lot of the software as a service trends, and obviously one of the most innovative companies in enterprise software. But you mentioned that your title is something around innovation evangelist. Now, some people get a bit of a bad rep with titles like evangelist, where people think they're just cheerleaders. But your work goes a lot deeper than that, doesn't it? So what do you actually do to evangelize innovation at Salesforce?
So, I often say that I don't think, stay with me for a second as I say this, that I don't think that Salesforce sells technology. Of course, I know we do. But I think we sell change, and change is super hard. And so, my role, plus I'm not the only one, there's a number of us, is really about sort of inspiring the art of the possible of how to use and when to use technology to change processes, to change the way things have been done for some time, all in the spirit of improving both the customer experience that companies have with their customers, as well as what the employee experience is alongside that. So, I think that I think evangelist is also a way. I don't have a team of people, and so if I were to say my rank and file, right, it's like, oh, she must have a budget. She must have people report to her. She must have internal responsibility in that way. And I'm almost exclusively externally facing. So evangelist is the best way to categorize that. And Guy Kawasaki was sort of the first many, many years ago at Apple. And I don't mind being in that club.
Absolutely. I mean, I've only got respect for people who manage to help other people see the art of what's possible and to help change this growth mindset. So taking that a step further, talking about growth, that's obviously one of the things you're most known for, especially your book, Growth IQ. What were these sort of insights that made you think, I need to share this with the world in a book, and how does that relate to helping people and companies grow?
Yeah, I would say this. Look, having been a practitioner and then advising companies, I had to find my footing, right, to get from doing to actually advising. And that is not an easy transition, by the way. It took me a couple years to first find my voice, second figure out what I wanted to say. But over time, I had 4,000 or 5,000 conversations with customers of all sizes while I was at Gartner. It could be a startup that was saying, hey, how do I hire my first salesperson and what should they look like from a capabilities and skills standpoint, all the way to the largest tech selling organizations in the world. And I, hang up the phone from I'm trying to hire my first person to, hi, I'm trying to reimagine how we manage 35,000 or 40,000 sellers. Like it, right? The advice was the same. The difference was scale, budget, brand awareness, technology, right? Complications, legacy bloat, all the things that an established company has versus a startup. But when I got into the guts of, hey, listen, we're finding it more difficult to grow now today than we did a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, obviously pre-pandemic, I would hear these three things. What can we do? Should we hire more salespeople? Should we spend more marketing dollars? Or should we cut costs? And that was really a conversation of I'm trying to change the trajectory of the selling engine in quarter, meaning like, you're 2 or 3 weeks in, you see it's a little soft. You're trying to fix that and course correct in an 8-week period. If anybody's ever tried to do that, it's very, very difficult because you're either going to spend more marketing money, right, to pump more into the top of the funnel to try to get more out of the bottom of the funnel. And if you're going to hire more salespeople, you can't always get them up and productive fast enough to have in-quarter impact. So unfortunately, the default was either marketing spend to drive more into the funnel or cut costs to artificially show growth in the quarter while sort of, fixes were happening in the background. But usually if they did that cost cut, it was really difficult to get back, right? Because they've cut the costs and now getting budget back and headcount back and all the things that were changed back is difficult, for a leader to go back to the, the leadership team and say, hey, I want to, put these things back in place. So I felt like there had to be other ways than those three, which we all know there are more ways than those three. But that is that kind of status quo mindset of the expert who has always done it that way and it's worked, or they tried something in the past and it didn't work. And so they've got the answers to all the suggestions of why it won't work versus having that beginner's mind of, hold on a second, there are more levers you can pull. So Growth IQ was really a culmination of me taking the growth strategies that have been around for decades. None of them were really invented by me. What I did was I modernized those that have been around for a really long time with social, mobile, cloud, big data, which has, an AI and machine learning and analytics and automation and all the things that we now have at our disposal when it comes to sales, marketing, customer service, innovation, growth, that it needed to be told in a modern way. And so that's really what it was. But it was, to your point, a way for me to scale that advice and create a framework by which people can refer to over time forever, right? If they say, look, we need to get better at selling into our customer base, there's a chapter on that that really stands alone. Or we need to develop new products, there's a chapter on that that stands alone. So it was a way for me to deliver that in a format that people could consistently refer to over time as they look to establish better growth, more predictable growth in their business.
It's interesting you mentioned this example of someone who's in the status quo who uses phrases like, well, I know why that won't work. I wrote an article a while back around the different types of corporate antibodies. And one of the most powerful is the person who has either experience of how it didn't work before or has a vested interest in other people not showing that they, when they tried it before, didn't manage it. So there's obviously all of these things that companies can try to grow from the capabilities perspective, where you build out, as you mentioned, these new capabilities. But did you also find any things that companies need to change to remove blockers to growth? So some of the more endemic or systemic issues.
Yeah, it's a great question. Really, the opening of the book was a study done by Bain. And while these are big size numbers I'm about to say, I have shared this obviously hundreds, if not thousands of times and heard, yes, it's us as well. And so it goes something like this. It was brands that were, larger than 5 billion and smaller than 5 billion, which is why I said it's it's a large number. But the bottom line was that it was sort of, in the low 90% range on average, that internal inertia was the reason that they were unable to create repeatable and sustainable growth. And so that internal inertia, regardless of size, is this sort of samenism, fixed mindset, not open to new things, really trying to find that beginner's mind. A lot of that is because, look, we have to fall in love with being uncomfortable. The I don't know. I think the pandemic was a great example of nobody knew the answer. So if nobody knew the answer, then everybody was open to new ideas, right? I don't know the answer. We don't have a playbook on how to, work our way through a global shutdown, and then 2 years of just significant disruption and continuing to feel it on the supply chain side, as well as, on the human toll side. And so I think that now has created a muscle that maybe organizations had never exercised before, which is this rapid innovation, rapid failure, agility, being more, being able to persevere, building more resilience into the business. And those used to be sort of words. But on the backside of that is also that there was no scenario planning, that if something like this happened, like if the supply chain shut down, what are we going to do? And so it forced businesses to not be, if you will, ignoring the fact that there is going to be things that come at them. And if they don't have a culture that is able to absorb, stop, slow down, right, to speed up, to figure out, okay, where do we need to focus? They're going to continue to find themselves in this situation where they're fighting that inertia. And they're not able to get over it. And so sometimes it literally is, like, to be the most dramatic, it needs entirely new leadership. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's not new leadership, but it's a cultural transformation. Like, what do we stand for? What are we doing? How do we get everybody to be more engaged and committed to their roles, so that they can innovate better and faster, be more responsive to customers, be better collaborators and teammates, and sort of take care of the greater shareholder community. That's all a good thing. So I hope that now new habits have formed. And so when we come out the other side of this and it moves into endemic status, that we actually hang on to these new capabilities that we might not have had, especially at scale, especially in mid-size and small organizations. It was more of we're just trying to keep up with whatever it was. We don't have time to stop and plan. And now I think people realize the power of actually doing those plans and talking to customers and talking to employees in different ways, to always be listening for those signals, especially as it comes to innovation and growth.
I mean, there's been so much change over the last couple of years. Partially because of the pandemic, and now also as a remnant of the way that companies need to think of how they make their businesses more resilient and making future growth possible. During that time period, before we started the recording, you also mentioned that you've been using this time to go out and find some more interesting information, and you've done some research with companies around the world to help understand what it's going to take to trigger that next round of growth, especially related to how they use their own talent that already exists in their company, their customers, the customer experience drivers, their employees. Can you, without giving too much away, because I know you're gonna have a book highlighting some of these insights coming out sometime soon, but what sort of things did you set out to find, and what did you actually end up finding?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I when I wrote Growth IQ and I had the 10 paths to growth, I started with customer experience with sort of path one. Like, that needs to be your true north. It's, why you do things. Without a customer, you don't have a business. Without a customer, you don't bring in revenue, all of those things. And not that the 10 growth paths were incorrect. They were absolutely correct. But in full transparency, I didn't talk about employee at all. I sort of made this underlying assumption that obviously people are doing the work of all the things I'm talking about, right? It's not happening miraculously. So I was standing on stage at an event maybe three and a half years ago, if not a little longer. And I said, I didn't think it was a coincidence that Salesforce is one of the best places to work around the globe. If it's not number one, it's sort of in the top 5 or 10, pretty much everywhere. It's one of the most innovative companies in the world. and the fastest growing enterprise software company. All three of those sort of things I just said are not us saying it. It's really external validation from organizations. And so I went to our CMO at the time and I said, I'd love to prove out this hypothesis. You hear all the time, like, obviously if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers, the rest will take care of itself. I mean, so many people have said that, Richard Branson, Herb Kelleher, all kinds of executives. That was nothing new, but I wanted to actually prove the causation, meaning the employee lever. How can you use that to actually improve customer experience to have a positive impact on growth? I never imagined what we would find, that EX or employee experience was the missing link between really accelerating that growth on the customer side. So if you're really focused on employee, you saw a growth rate of X. If you focused on customer, you saw a growth rate of Y. You also saw the KPIs on satisfaction between employee and customer increase. But when you did both, you saw a 1.8x. So it's like 1.3 and 1.4x. You saw a 1.8x improvement. That stat was US only, to be clear. But for $1 billion brand, it was a $40 million impact. So if you're a $5 million brand, you can do the math. And so we knew that there was some there. So then we said, let's go do this globally. So we did surveys between the C-suite, right? So the executive layer and employees. And we asked them a series of questions, obviously, to try to uncover what are the things, what are the activities, what are the processes and tools and systems and culture that's being delivered by a brand to its employees, what's working, what's not working when it comes to doing their job, obviously, but part of that and servicing, developing products, selling to, marketing to, and serving from a customer experience standpoint. And I'm guessing you wouldn't be surprised there was a gap between the two. Like outdated technology was number one for employees of holding back a company. It was a barrier to growth. Outdated technology was number 6 for executives. I just focus on technology as an example because you basically can't do your job today without using tech. The other on the employee side was we can't keep team members, right? This great resignation, this exodus of talent is impacting the ability for teams, cohesion, collaboration, trust, right? Psychological safety, all the things that come along with a high performing team. If you're losing players in that team, it's disruptive to productivity and the capabilities. And training and investment and career development and all those things on the employee side, I think the lack of focus there over the decades, right? This just didn't happen overnight. I think the pandemic shined a light on the lack of investments that have been made on the employee side that were having impact on, mental health, well-being, satisfaction, engagement, which then literally translates into, is the company able to innovate and grow and serve the customers on an ongoing basis? So that's it at a high level, is trying to uncover what are the aspects of an employee's day-to-day that has direct impact and implication to customer experience that literally then impacts the ability for a brand to grow.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
At a high level.
there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things, obviously, being the difference in priorities and perception from the people in the C-suite compared to the people on the ground. We see that very often. And I'd be interested to get your perspectives on what the leadership thought the main drivers or the main issues were. But also, one of the things I'd just like to get clarification on is, when you're talking about things like employee experience, what exactly is that measuring? Is it just measuring how happy am I feeling today? Am I feeling like I'm doing a good job and being productive? Or is this really going deeper into sentiment towards the company and the work being done? Or what's actually being measured here?
Yeah, and thank you for the clarifying question, because I want to be transparent, obviously, to your listeners. Is I am not an HR expert. Like that's not where I sort of spend my time or have, sort of gained a perspective that I believe would be, impactful, because that's not my world. My world is really growth. So I wanted to very squarely focus in on where the E touches the C. So I am not saying that DE&I, SDGs, psychological safety, culture, all those things aren't really important. They are really important. Flexible work environment, like all of those things. But I was really focused in on that day-to-day effort they have to put in. So it would include things like, do I feel like I'm supported in my role with the technology, with training, with career development? Do I feel that the executives listen to my voice on, I think there's a better way to do it, or they include us in decisions about what are we going to innovate? What products are we going to launch? Like, what are we doing as a company? Like those types of conversations were where I really wanted to focus my time. There are a lot of books out there on how to improve employee all up. This is not going to be that. This is going to be, where that employee day to day has the ability to impact the customer, at that moment when they're either going to learn more about the brand, buy from the brand, get service from the brand, whatever it might be.
And how about taking it back to the first question I asked there, which was from the senior leadership perspective, what were they in their minds maybe thinking were the big drivers, and where were they surprised that there was a big disconnect?
Yeah, I will tell you this. I was surprised. I wasn't surprised at the disconnect because that's sort of obvious. If you've ever watched the American show Undercover Boss, which is where executives of companies will disguise themselves and go out into the field, to their warehouses or their retail stores or their plants or whatever it might be, and sort of they will be a new hire and they'll get trained and they'll use the equipment or they'll deliver whatever it is or they'll have to clean up the stockroom and they actually see it firsthand. That show has always been so fascinating to me. I never miss it because it is a perfect experiment of how is it that you do not know that this is what's going on in your business because you're managing it in the four walls in a spreadsheet. And so, my friend Tom Peters, who wrote the book In Search of Excellence, is all about management by wandering around, right? And wandering around now is so much easier because you could do so much more wandering via video. So the same kind of effort you put into customer journey mapping and surveying your customers on what they want, are you doing the same thing to employees, or you just survey them once a year and you just kind of go, if we're doing well, they're going to be happy. That couldn't be further from the truth. But companies that were saying, well, yes, we are doing this. What was really surprising to me was still like none of that, we are doing this, or I feel good about this, or I think we've really improved on this was larger than like 55%. So we still have almost 50% of people going, we're either not doing it, we're not doing it well, or we haven't even thought about it. The majority of companies don't even have an executive who owns employee experience. I'm not talking about an HR executive because it's not an HR problem, right? Employee experience is like, whose innovation, whose responsibility is innovation? Whose responsibility is growth? Whose responsibility is customer experience? Everybody's, right? Because everybody plays a part. And so same thing for EX, but nobody is owning it. HR tends to not ask employees what they need and what they want. They're designing programs without their input. That sort of list of that disconnect of, we don't think it's outdated technology. We think it's something else, but it isn't something else. If you ask your employees, they're going to tell you. Very similar to the conversations I had 15 years ago when customer experience started to become this new battleground, if you will, and marketers were taking on more responsibility. The same thing now has to happen on the E side. And I think it's the perfect time, although I was already down this road pre-pandemic, there isn't a conversation or a day that goes by that the employee exodus, war on talent, can't find good people, can't keep good people, that conversation happening. It was a timely piece of research that I think shines a light on the fact that we slightly have over pivoted to C, meaning customer, at the expense of E, meaning employee.
I think there's probably a lot of reasons why that's happened. Partially, a lot of companies, when they look at how to grow, they'll look at the companies which seem to be growing the fastest. And in most cases, those are technology companies. Yet, those are primarily business to customer technology companies, where you can improve the customer experience through things like user experience, user design, A/B testing the impact of changing a font size or a website layout or the app design. But the interesting thing, talking to you from Salesforce, is most people probably aren't aware outside of companies that know about enterprise software that business to business transactions, even for very high end software, are very people based. So there's relationships that are required. There's customization that's required. There's face to face interactions during the sales cycle and during maintenance and customer support. So you're in a unique position to have this perspective of how employees are interacting with customers, because that is primarily part of the Salesforce way of working.
Yeah, I'd say something to what I sort of give you a little bit different of a viewpoint on something you just said is, look, in the business to consumer space, as individual consumer, forget your day job life, right? Your consumer life, we have all these experience with app-based things, right? Could be banking on an app, calling a car, an Uber on an app, ordering groceries on an app, like, doing so much now on an app in our consumer lives. And then we show up to work, and maybe we're at home still working. We show up in our work hours, and that experience is very different than the one we have on the consumer side, right? Like, why can't it be as easy for me to order, a box of paper in my home office as it is for me to buy a box of paper personally? You know what I mean? Like, I have to do all this for work, and it's like one click for personal, right? And so this consumer expectation now is being threaded across everything we do. It isn't just in the C space. So there is no longer this distinction or delineation between what you experience in your personal life versus what you experience in your professional life. Now people are like, why isn't it the same? And so in the B2B world, most of the time, B is servicing C. So, a lot of the C experiences you may be having at some of these app-driven companies may be built on the Salesforce platform, maybe using the Salesforce technology. You may not even realize that it is, because that's the point, right? It's supposed to be seamless and easy and do the solution, right? The jobs to be done doesn't change. It's the solution that changes. And so how do we bring that, excuse me, that consumer experience into B? And so I don't actually like to call it B2B and B2C anymore. I call it B2E, which is business to everything, everyone, every experience, regardless of whether they're wearing their C hat or their work hat, if you will, if that makes sense. And so I don't like the delineation, because especially when you're talking about a Gen Z workforce now, you've got 5 generations working, which has never happened ever. The Gen Z only knows this sort of app-based experience economy. So then they show up to work and they're like, okay, wait, what? So the average enterprise has some 900 apps. Okay. The average enterprise. And only 27% of them are integrated. Now, there are some of that 900 that shouldn't be, right? It's legal, it's HR, it's finance. So take those off the table for a second. So let's say of the 900 apps, let's just say 700 of them could be integrated, right? And 200 of them should never be integrated, right? You still are looking at a huge chunk, like 500 that are not integrated. So I'm an employee and I have to log into 5 systems to do my job. That's not a great experience. That's that outdated technology, right? Because my perception is I can do it so easily, quote unquote, in my consumer life. Why is it so difficult in my personal life? Now, it's not like all apps in our personal life. That's why we have 100 apps on this, our home screens on our phones. Those things aren't necessarily integrated, but even though they're not integrated, it's so fast and seamless. It's not that painful. There are things that, of course, could be better. But if you look at the B side, right, the B2B side, it's drastically different than the C side. And I think, if you're listening to this and you're a product developer or an app developer, or a portal developer, right, the person that's creating whatever either your employee or your customer is interacting with, or you're a CIO or an IT manager, you have an opportunity now to do the same heavy lifting you did for the customer, to do it for your employees.
Tiffani, wise words to live by. Excellent point to end by as well. If people want to find out more about you and your work, what's the best place they can go to find out more?
So I'm very active on social media. Follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm at Tiffani_Bova, and it's Tiffany with an I at the end. On Twitter, and then it's at Tiffani Bova, all one word, on Instagram and Facebook, so you can follow me there. I've got a podcast called What's Next with Tiffani Bova, where I interview some amazing and fun guests all the time. And then, as you kindly mentioned, I've got a new book coming out next year. We'll see. There's a paper supply chain issue, apparently. So we're shooting for March. We'll see next year, but it will be fingers crossed before the end of May of next year.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get all of those links down in the description below. Tiffani, it's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.